Welcome back to the fourth video about the article Socialization in the Family, Ethnic and Ecological Perspectives. Socialization is the process in which an individual's standards, skills, motives, attitudes and behaviors change to conform to those around them. These people would have been seen as desirable and appropriate for the person's present or future role in society. That is why one would want to conform. There are many agents and agencies that influence socialization, and these agents function together rather than independently. There are several evident themes when it comes to research into socialization. The first theme is the systems theory, which emphasizes on family as a system. You have family members and their direct and indirect influences, relationships among family members as units of analysis themselves. This also includes the family as a unit, independent of the individual or the dyads. Transactional models of relationships with conceptual thinking about families so far has been quite unidimensional, and parent influencing child, with the child always having a passive role. Transactional models of relationships. So far, conceptual thinking about families has been quite unidimensional. Parent influencing child, but the child having a passive role. Power relations were always portrayed as very static. A bilateral model has now emerged as the dominant paradigm in parent-child relationships, with a two-way influence and an interdependent power dynamic. Embeddedness of families in other social systems. This includes a range of extra-familial influences, including culture. It's inspired by Bronfenbrenner's ecological theory. Importance of considering family relationships from a developmental perspective. The developmental change in adults, too, is now more considered than before, and the changes in relationships that children form. Universality of socialization theories. It has become more and more evident that not everything can be globalized. There is more awareness to the importance of this. Recognition of the impact of secular shifts on families. With this, they mean the changes in families that have come simply throughout time. The changes in size, onset of parenthood, social and family trajectories are embedded in the historic time and age that you live in. Biological basis, or the recognition of the role of genetics. The processes of affect and cognition. These are viewed as central in socialization. They are interdependent and mutually influence each other. Multidisciplinary perspectives, which basically speaks for itself, they now view this idea, this concept of socialization through many different perspectives instead of only taking the one road. Longitudinal and experimental studies, which give more weight to carefully designed longitudinal studies and experimental studies. Recent research has focused on a variety of subsystems, including parent-child, marital, and sibling-to-sibling systems. Each of these subsystems is discussed individually in the context of socialization. Traditional paradigms focus on the impact of the relationship between a parent and child, or on the parenting style. The tripartite model represents more than only this single pathway. It adds an influence of parent on child through a role as instructor, educator, or consultant. Also a third role as a manager of social lives, which regulates opportunities for social context and cognitive experiences. There surely is an effect of parent-child interaction on the socialization of children. There exist two approaches to these. First is the typological approach. An important figure within this approach is Baumrind. She distinguished three types of parenting typologies. The authoritative method, which is very much associated with positive outcomes, authoritarian, and permissive. Maccabee and Martin extended this typology based on combinations of certain dimensions and included the disengaged parenting style. This is characterized by neglect and lack of involvement. The dimensions that they base this off is looking at how warm and responsive a parent can be, the unresponsiveness and rejecting, restrictive and being demanding, and being permissive or undemanding. A major concern about the focus on parental style is the limited attention to how the processes that account for the effects of different styles on children's development are sketched. Research into socialization has often either been on molar level or molecular level, but rarely ever united into one study. In an attempt to resolve this, Darling and Steinberg distinguished parental styles and parental practices. A style is a constellation of attitudes toward the child that are communicated to the child and create an emotional climate in which parents' behaviors are expressed. Practices mean behaviors defined by specific content and socialization goals, like going to school and physical punishment at home. A second concern is the issue in what direction the effects go. We do not know if the styles that Baumrin described were also in response to the behavior of the child. Some would argue that the child's temperament largely determines the nature of the parental style. A third concern is that this typological scheme might not really be universal, neither generalizable over cultures or over socioeconomic statuses. The second approach is the parent-child interactional approach. This approach is largely based on the importance of face-to-face interaction, and the conclusions from this approach are that the style of interaction is linked to a variety of social outcomes. Being high in responsive warm dimension leads to higher social competency, for example. And although there is an overlap between mothers and fathers make a unique and independent contribution to their children's social development. Several mediators have been found in parent-child interaction and peer outcomes. In the image you can see 3 clusters of mediating effects, each with their own parts. Affect management skills is one of them. This is described as learning the cluster of processes associated with the understanding and regulation of affective displays. They are learned during parent-child interaction. The ability to encode emotional signals and decode others' emotional states is a relevant set of skills in peer interaction. Research suggests parental support and acceptance of children's emotions is related to their ability to manage them. The second mediating mechanism is the cognitive representational model. How do children transfer the strategies that they learned in their family to peer relations? Some theories assume that individuals possess internal mental representations that guide their social behavior. Bowlby suggests these representations differ from child to child depending on their attachment history, and evidence was found for this suggestion. The cognitive representations of social behavior for both fathers and mothers were found to be related to their children's representations. These models might thus be transmitted across generations and serve as mediators between the family and the child's other relationships. The third mediating mechanism is attention regulation. These skills appear to be more critical among children who experience higher levels of emotional negativity. Sustained attention and less impulsivity were associated with higher social competence scores. The goal of parent-child interaction is not explicitly to influence children's social relationships. Thus it can be seen as indirect. There might be a direct effect, however, of parents influencing it via their role as an instructor, educator, or advisor. Parents guide their kids in peer relations by first managing it, like bringing kids over to play dates or supervising activities, and then when the kids grow up a bit more, they provide advice or consultation. Monitoring is an important way in which parents affect their children's social relationships. Kerr and Staton argue that this process is co-constructed by parent and child. The parental role of manager is important. They make choices about living in which neighborhoods and going to which schools, and thus influence the setting in which children meet peers. But even here, we view parents and children as co-designers. Parental style, advice giving, and managing often operate together during socialization. Researcher Mounts has found that regardless of parental style, all use prohibiting and guiding as management strategies. Monitoring and supporting are more common in authoritative households. These are, and many other studies illustrate the interdependence among the components. Co-parenting shows that mothers and fathers operate as a team and as individual parents. It can have different patterns depending on the interaction between the two co-parenting co-parents. As described in the article, a pattern signifying antagonistic and adult-centered or hostile competitive, a pattern marked by significant imbalance or parenting discrepancy in levels of parental engagement with the child, and a pattern reflecting cooperation, warmth, cohesion, and child-centeredness or high family harmony. It's quite a mouthful, but this description practically says it all. The different patterns, of course, have different influences in how the child behaves in social situations later on, ranging from aggression to parent-rated anxiety to clinical symptomatology. Co-parenting accounts for a unique variance in child measures. Of course, children's experience extend beyond their interaction with their parents. Marital functioning is related to children's short-term coping and long-term adjustment. When there is marital discord, the child might display poorer quality of interpersonal relationships with both siblings and peers. There are two alternative models proposed to account for the impact of marital relations. The spillover hypothesis says that mood or behavior in one subsystem transfers to the other. So, if you have marital issues, they will spill over to your relationship with your child. Then you have the compensatory hypothesis, which proposes that a positive parent-child relationship can be maintained even with marital conflict and provides a buffer for the child. The spillover hypothesis is much more supported, however. Marital discord can also be a very direct effect. Lab experiments have shown that the form of expression of marital conflict plays a role in how children react to the exposure of it. The frequency and intensity of interparental conflict has a disturbing effect on children. Resolution of conflict reduces children's negative reaction. Children learn valuable life lessons and skills from negotiating conflict and resolving disagreements. Through their relationship with siblings, children develop interaction patterns and social understanding skills. Observing your parents interact with your siblings also has an effect and provides context for children to deal with issues of differential treatment. The evidence of actual carryover of interaction with siblings to peers is limited, but siblings surely play a role in compensating for other problematic relationships. They buffer the feeling of loneliness when a child is isolated in their peer relationships. Children who displayed a more positive interaction style with a best friend behaved more positively towards getting a new sibling. Management of conflict might be learned in interaction with peers as opposed to with parents. Besides parent-parent, child-parent, parent-sibling, and child-sibling interactions, the family as a unit changes across development and responds to change in the individual members. Families develop climates which provide differing socialization contexts for the developing child. Processes that regulate the child's development are, for example, family myths, beliefs that influence the family process, provide continuity across generations, and are generally not open to discussion or debate. Family of origin experiences, which are transmitted across generations through stories and shared memories and shape contemporary interactions. And rituals and routines that are associated with better child health and better behavioral regulation. So we have learned about a lot of different influences on how a child behaves around peers, all coming from the family in one way or another. This is a comprehensive model in which all contributions can be seen. Little is known about the weighting of different relationships. There also needs to be more research into the pathways, but these are the ones deemed as possible by the authors. The questions that still need to be answered are: do all combinations produce equally socially competent children? Are some pathways more important than others? Can negative pathways be compensated with other positive pathways? And so many more questions. Belsky proposed a 3-domain model of the determinants of parenting. So, what determines parental style? Child characteristics are one thing that can definitely determine a parental style. There are some universal predispositions, of course, like by being biologically prepared for challenges, and individual differences, things like temperament, fear, activity, social responsiveness, and compliance. Personal resources are also very important. Having the right knowledge, ability, and motivation, or being depressed as a parent is a very influential pattern. It causes children to more likely have an insecure attachment, including a disorganized attachment behavior. Positive personal characteristics and transpersonal orientation, so focus on family, work, and child rearing, are linked to better quality in parenting. Contextual sources of stress and support, like social capital. Social capital considers relations, institutions, organizations, and community. It's the flow of information, sharing of norms and values, and it serves to facilitate or constrain the actions of people. Children benefit a lot if this exists. It can also aid a parent's socialization of their children. More social support is available through community ties, and it promotes the maintenance of values and norms that influence the children. It enables closer child supervision as well. Socioeconomic status is argued to be a dynamic concept. Families shift through statuses over time. Lower SES parents tend to be more authoritarian. Social change and family socialization changes continuously. Social trends provide an opportunity to explore how families change in response to these shifting circumstances. They challenge our traditional assumption that families can just be studied in one point of time. Recent shifts in family employment and unemployment are discussed in the article. For example, that women participate more in the labor force now. Even though maternal employment increased, between 1981 and 1997, time spent with children did not really change. There are a few negative outcomes of maternal employment due to the reallocation of a mother's time and priorities. Positive outcomes too, like a more egalitarian view of gender roles or higher educational and occupational goals in children, and also longer school attendance. If the quality of the work environment is good, then this is reflected in the influence on children. The home experience affects job performance as well. This was the 4th article for the course Developmental Personal Relationships. I hope you learned something, and good luck with studying. Thanks for watching.